G'day, everybody. How's it going out there? We got some decent news today, and it's not very often that we get to do feel-good stories here, so I'm very happy to be sharing this one with you. So it kind of is in the same vein as the theme for this year so far, and that is, uh, furries, the furry scare, as it were, or the sort of thing going on with that, and the worries about what the kids are learning in schools these days. But this one comes down to a library, a public library in Ridgeland, Mississippi. It's a suburb of Jacksonville. It's about found to the north of the downtown Jacksonville. And a mayor for that particular region had decided to hold up funding that was allocated for their libraries. This news story came, not that one, sorry, this one. So, January 25th, news started to come out from media news organizations in Mississippi about this situation that was occurring, where a Ridgeland mayor basically was saying, "Well, you were funded $110,000 as a public library to be given, but I am holding up that funding until you remove some books from that public library." And so that became a big point on social media and things like that. But for one person in particular within the furry fandom, decided to try to go, hey, like, we need to do something about this. This individual is known for a blog that they do in which they cover nonfiction materials, dealing usually around with social activism, social media, and technology. And so this person is called Sotok Dole. Sotok Dole. I think that's how you pronounce the name. Unfortunately, the issue with being in an online, like 90% text-based culture is that you don't hear people's names out loud. So you kind of, try to put the phonemes together. So if I pronounce that wrong, I apologize. But basically, they forwarded the news article that was covered by Judd, I can't read it, Legum. Judd Legum. I'm pretty sure I pronounced that one right. And their article about the situation that was occurring. So, lo and behold, there was kind of a lull period between when, people started to, share that information and when things started to sort of snowball into an effect. And how it started snowballing is the library in question originally only was expecting to raise $2,500 for their campaign, and to just try to cover up funding until they could get together to try to get the mayor to release the funds to them. But now we're climbing to the point where we're almost hitting the entirety of the stipend that they would have gotten for the year anyway. So we see here that this is taken a day ago from this time, and you're going to see this a day later. I checked it just before streaming here, and it was like 110,000, or it's 101,000-ish at this point. So it's growing still pretty readily, and it still has a few days to go. I believe it's going until the 12th, so basically to the end of this week. So if you want to contribute to that, you may. Basically, it is sort of a counter message to the mayor about censorship and how people will not abide by censorship of books covering these sort of issues and these sort of topics, or topics in this kind of general issue, right? And so, as that number started to climb and continued to climb, Vice News wrote an article about the furries are leading the war against a book-banning Mississippi mayor. Right, so the narrative basically had shifted in the earlier part of the year from, oh, furries are taking over the schools, to furries like protecting libraries from over-scrupulous individuals who wish to ban certain books for their own political agendas, right? One of the website where you can see the donations actually goes into a little bit more detail as to sort of what the communication was. And the communication was basically the mayor went to them and said, well, I'm doing this for the Lord, and I'm doing this because I'm doing this because I don't want these homosexual materials, and that is the words he used to describe the books that he wanted removed from the library. Basically, he said that those are the two things that he was primarily concerned about. One of the issues when it comes to censorship is that when you start asking for it and you start requesting that certain materials are removed from a certain space, and people start to ask questions. It's like, what materials were they fine with keeping? And interestingly enough, when I wrote my article for this particular thing, which you can find in the link in the description below, it has a bunch of links to like all the little threads and all the little articles that you've seen here, and you can like go and look into this more deeply. The interesting thing is that sometimes in the comment section for Flare, they get kind of toxic at times, but even so, like, interesting things get learned, and unfortunately, like, some things you can't unsee in some ways. So, Raukin was like, well, you're just like the people here are just anti-censorship of this, but if it were for something else, they probably wouldn't have stood up and said that. And my response to that was, that sort of that sort of statement was, in essence, like, that's how anti-censorship works. Certain people don't want to see certain things censored, and if more people speak out against the censorship, then it helps mitigate that censorship. It's sort of how it works in the real world. And saying that you're not going to protect somebody from saying something else about some censorship because you don't think those same people would come to bat for you when your thing is being censored, then basically we're in a zero-sum game, right? Everything will eventually be censored. And I was about to make a joke about maybe the mayor can make some sort of thing about like a Mein Kampf, like we have one copy of Mein Kampf versus like for every gay book we have in there, right? Maybe we can come to that agreement, and he'll be happy with that. But then that joke turned into something a little more serious as I started looking that up. And it turns out Ridgeland's Mississippi Library does have a particular copy of the book. I must put a caveat here. This book is available in multiple libraries across the United States country because of the First Amendment. When the publishing rights for that particular man's book basically became more public domain, a lot of people had republished it, and the book is called Mein Kampf, My Struggle, and it's available in that library that the mayor was like, oh yeah, let's get rid of these homosexual materials. Mr. Mayor, did you know that there is a copy of a Hitler book in there, literally written by the guy, and you said nothing? No, nothing. Got to say anything about that? All right. Well, it's one of those things where it's like, pay attention to what people care about, and pay attention to the things that they're not. Now, here's the thing: a book is a book, and in my opinion, this is my personal opinion about books and censorship. If you can read and understand a material, that to me is the gate, right? It's not like visual media or sound media or anything like that. Written words, if you can read the words on the page and understand those words and understand the implications and the meanings and the context behind them, then that means you're mature enough to read them. In my opinion, that's what that means. Like if you're able to read a book and understand the book, that's the gate, right? Because it's like it's not like visual mediums or in-person interactions where it can go to a level of degree of censorship or a level of degree of maturity that everyone in the room might not be ready for. It's not, because a written thing is, picking up a book to read. First off, you're picking up the book to read. So it's literally, you are choosing to read this book. The second thing is, you are choosing to read and interpret what's in that book, right? So banning the book doesn't help anybody because, they're just going to interpret it. They're just going to they're just going to interact in the real world anyway. So to me, banning books doesn't even help. And yes, even that one. But the caveat to me is that sort of book, when you're reading that sort of book that I showed earlier, is that you should have the context of history in your mind when you're reading it. Understanding how somebody can use flowery language or language of revenge and anger and bitterness and struggle and strife to meld people into more strife-like behavior, and understanding how people can coerce things like that can be very good in defending against that in the future. Or it can be used by those who wish to have strife to help inflame things and learn from the tactics used for people who were effective before them. Which is why it's a very, very dangerous book to some people. But of course, we're not talking about whether that one's banned. We're talking about banning books on homosexual materials, which in the end of the day is mostly harmless compared to a person who created a state who was killing their own citizens. I think gay sex is mostly harmless. But apparently a mayor of Mississippi doesn't quite think so. And so the furries spoke loudly and clearly that they're not going to sit idly by and wait for a mayor to decide what is read in the library. So, ruckus in libraries, 2022. It's kind of like we can't go out and do things all that much still. We're still getting used to getting out and doing things more often. Don't go after the libraries, man. They were there for us when we had to sit in here and sit and wait for the world to get back running. So, please just be kind to your local libraries and read a good book, and we'll see you next time on things. Kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. What do you feel about, what do you think about this whole situation? Are you concerned more about more mayors trying to take initiative and do things like that, like this mayor did? And do you think that furries should start to focus more and prepare more to help libraries who are struggling against these kind of executive influences onto the materials that they hold in their facilities? Let me know, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.